Alright, hello everyone. This will be the first instance of a new series called T&Tlog or Tips and Trick Log. Tips and Tricks is like the series our data science people do, where they like make videos, do all sorts of helpful stuff. Um, Going by the theme of my channel, these will be called Tips and Tricks Log because everything is a log here. Um, So, right now, this is all a bit on the fly, right? Because I was mainly motivated to do this because what I'm going to show you, was the subject of today's class, and I was so incensed by um, how ineffectively we had taught it that I decided to, go for a spin on this video making stuff and try to make up for some discrepancies I saw, right? So, as a new series, I'm gonna have to set some formats, some expectations. So here I'm gonna be using some 3Ps, right? So this will be Paint, which you see right here, Python in the Jupyter Notebook, and a PowerPoint. This will depend on whether I have a PowerPoint. Today I do. Um, I'm also emphasizing a bit on starting from scratch, right? I've seen a bunch of instructors come here with like fully fledged notebooks with all these different examples waiting to be run, right? Um, I want to keep it different in that I'm going to show you all that I type in, mainly because um, even the mere act of having things already prepared, I feel that might gloss over some issues a student might have, right? Um, Then I want to use lots of analogies, explanatory tools, um, to really like dig in to what this means on an intuitive level. So I don't really care about you merely knowing this stuff. I plan to really have you think about what it means, the broader picture, that sort of a thing, right? Lastly, I'm gonna need to put chapters on this video, so that if you only need help on a specific section, I can just like point you there via the chapters. You don't have to watch the whole like hour-long thing. Um, okay, goals. What do I plan to do right now? I plan to clarify or like clean up what was said in class. It was, in my opinion, a bit of a like a hodgepodge. Um, I was going on the fly. I think um, it was all very messy. We could have done better, I think. Along with that, I want to reinforce what was being taught, um, mainly through the analogies and explanatory tools. And finally, I want to give you guys a structure for coding. Not only for the permutation test, but also for like coding in general. How should you approach it? What's your general strategy during coding, right? Because I feel like that was never really fully defined. Okay, okay. So this will be the main stuff here. This is my PowerPoint. This was the in-class slides. So some of this might look familiar. Um, I will go here now. Good. Permutation test is the subject of today's video. Um, Given the complexity of the permutation test and all the coding we're gonna have to do, this might not be the first in terms of like how the series is structured. It is the first in terms of time, simply because like the circumstances necessitated it. But I'm probably gonna go back and do some more beginner stuff for the next few T&T logs, right? Okay, so context within the course. This is all within data science course, right? So if you're not part of that, get out. Um, so for labs 0 and 2, it was mainly coding um, in terms of like arithmetic, basic functions, that sort of thing. It's very much coders' first steps, right? Then labs 3 and 4, we started to get introduced to data. So we're using code to get um, to know things about data. This is trivial things about data. It's like beginner's guide to data, right? Um, um, for example, like what's the highest um, growth of a country's EPI rating, something like that, right? You're using code to get like some singular detail about a specific part of a data set. Now, Lab 5 and onwards, we're dealing with statistics, which is mainly um, the focus on of the whole data set. We're looking at a really big picture now. Um, that means we're getting to conclusions and we're getting to questions that deal not really with specific parts of the data set that you can see, but mainly overall trends that might be invisible to you if you are only focusing on a little bit. So that is the general trajectory. That being said, what this means is that we will not be as code oriented as we were in the first half of the semester, right? From here on, we generally expect that you have mastered the code and all the functions and methods from labs 0 to 5. That doesn't mean we're going to neglect you guys altogether. It mainly means that, in class time will mainly be spent on data, whereas you're going to have to be relying on, um, videos like these in order to really brush up on your coding skills. All right? Okay, so now, given that permutation test is your first real introduction to statistical tests, I might as well give you guys a brief introduction of statistics. Statistics is um, mainly the study of data. It concerns all parts of data as you see here, but the part we're focusing on is mainly about analysis. We are going to be using tests to really uh, know the behavior of a data set intuitively. Um, and that means all sorts of things, as you'll see. I don't want to get too specific, but you'll see. It's mainly about, yeah, expect that it's mainly about analysis. That's the thing. Permutation test will be the focus of today. We don't really focus on it on our labs. It's mainly there as a brief introduction to statistics. It is one of the simplest tests after all, and um, the main thing we want you guys to take away is to know how this test works, because number one, it functions in the I guess the emotion of the sub the know-how of a lot of other statistical tests. Like a lot of other statistical tests will also have a test statistic. They'll also have null and alternative hypotheses. This will be very common among statistical tests, right? And also the idea of simulations of random chance, incorporation of randomness is also a major factor in statistical tests. So, given that this is the simplest statistical test we're going to give you, it's very critical that you know the role of these in this test so you can be prepared for some of the more complex stuff later down the line. All right? Okay. The permutation test mainly looks to answer the question of correlation. So correlation is it's a bit hard to define, but generally, if you were to move one variable, the other variable would exhibit a movement. It doesn't have to be in the same direction, but like the movement of one variable um, leads to a movement of another, right? So as a small example, I can say that um, I can look at data for the temperature in in this area, right? And I can also look at the rate of drowning in this area. And I see that as temperatures rise, drowning rates rise, right? And Why is that? Because hotter weather causes more people to go to the pool, and more people in the pool means more likelihood of drowning. So we can say that, like, since a rise in temperature led to a rise in drowning rates, we can say that the two variables are correlated, right? That says nothing about like causation, right? I said that like higher temperatures cause drowning rates to happen, but that I know it's intuitive here, but it might not be intuitive later on. You'll just have to go off of the correlation aspect, right? I moved this one variable, and then I saw a change in another variable happen. This doesn't say anything about whether A caused B or whether B caused A, right? That's something for later. Okay, so first step, we have to define our data set and our variables, right? So, this is where I'm gonna go back to Jupyter because I want to show you guys something. This is mainly, this might be review. It's generally looking at are, how tables are structured, how they're formatted, especially in regards to data, right? So I'm gonna type in my code here. Imp, um, import all. Okay, this is just me importing stuff, and now farmers markets. I'm gonna bring in a table. This should be familiar stuff to you guys because this was back in lab 3. So what I want to show you guys is a very small thing, but I want to show you what rows and columns are used for in datasets. So in a row, all the details in a single row correspond to one so-called observation, right? So what this means is that if I were to look at this first row, they have a market name of Caledonia Farmers Market Association, Danville, right? Um, all the details on these in this single row are descriptors or like variables of this market association at Danville, right? We can look at the county. We see that it's in Caledonia. That being in Caledonia describes this market. Doesn't describe this market or this market. It's purely a descriptor of this market alone, right? And same thing, like Parma corresponds to Stearns Homestead Farmers Market. It's just all the details in a single row apply to the same observation. Here, the observations are farmers markets. In our simulation, each row corresponds to a student, right? So in class, what we had people do is we had people spread out across the room. So um, then we split the classroom into equal halves, right? If you were on the window side, you got a W. If you're on the door side, you got a D. And every person in the classroom would think of any number between 1 to 100, and they would write it down, and this is what you see here. So this is just a sample. This isn't the real data we got, but here, the first row, someone thought of a 6 and they were on the window side. This is one person. This is someone who's thought of a 55 and they were on the door side. That's another person. So each of these rows are people. And that's important because in this test, we're going to be thinking in terms of observations, or in this case, people. We're going to be manipulating people around. So we're going to be concerning the rows, right? This will be the focus of our discussion. So I've looked at what we did here. And the variable types, right? This is really important because this is what we need the data set to look like for us to actually be able to do the permutation test as it is described here. There are ways to do it with other kinds of variables, but we're not going to go into that today. So what I mean by uh, so this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do types of there. Well, first off, I'm gonna do what we'd already discussed: table anatomy. So one row corresponds to one observation, and all the descriptors that come with it. A column, I should put a space here. Column is about all the instances of a single variable. So, for example, the county column contains all the counties of the different farmers markets, right? Um, and we will, so yeah, we will be looking at the rows. Okay, and now what I want to explain now is the types of variables. So I have two types of variables. I've got quantitative, quantitative, and qualitative or categorical, right? Um, I'll just add here so I can explain everything. Or all right. So, um, a quantitative variable is something that's described with numbers, basically. Not really numbers, that's too general. But I'll look at the qualitative first. So, qualitative or categorical, those pretty much mean the same thing. Those are generally descriptive elements that are their own separate and distinct category, right? So, what I mean by that is I'm trying to think of an example. So, imagine we have we have sets, right? A set is just a collection of things, right? So imagine um, I have a set of everything that's red, and here I have a set of everything that's blue. These two things, red and blue, are qualitative or categorical ones, or categorical variables, because they don't really, I guess they could exist on a spectrum, but like as we describe it with just the words red and blue, they exist as their own distinct categories, right? So I can like put, like a fire truck, right? That's a very bloody fire truck, but that's not a fire truck. But say that this is a fire truck, what else is red? Oh, like I can go all sorts of things fire related. So that's a what is that? That's a that thing that dogs pee on, right? Um so yeah. This what else is red? I guess some cherries would be fine. Some cherries. So yeah, we got a set of all things that are red, and here we got a set of all things that are blue. Well, of course, the easier thing is water. Water is blue, and also, I'm spending too much time on this. What else is blue? Maybe some butterflies are blue. Yeah, some butterflies are blue. And we just need one more blue thing. Um, blue, 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 blue. Maybe like easy one, the sky. I'm wasting too much time. All right, that's I just did a cloud, but you get it. That's a sky. Um, so what this would look like in terms of data, it would look like this, right? So each column is a variable, right? So I can say that this column is color. I'll just say this is like object or something. We can say like fire truck, and that was red, right? And we can also say like cherries, and that was red. And we can say water, and that was blue. And sky, and that was blue. So when we say a qualitative or categorical variable, we merely mean that um, they exist as the descriptors of a certain category, right? I know that it just sounds vague, but you'll understand it better in contrast with uh, quantitative variables, right? Um, Quantitative variables exist over a spectrum. Oh, I forgot I was not on pen, right? So any sort of like measurement is a quantitative variable. So like distance, right? Um, you could have like 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, you know? And you can have like all the variables in between. So you can have like 2.5, right? Um, and that's different from here where it's just red, blue. There isn't any variable in between, or so we haven't defined yet. There could be yellow or something like that. But here, it's mainly about numbers. So wherever you see a number here, that's mainly what you'll think about. The exception is like binary. Um, Binary is something that's more qualitative. So, like, uh, there's a data set about heart disease that has different um, sets for if there's no heart disease and if there's yes heart disease, right? But they're described as 0 and 1. 0 for no heart disease, 1 for yes heart disease, right? Um, Even though they're numbers, this would be qualitative because it's describing two distinct sets, right? You can't have a like a that doesn't exist. It's either no or yes, and that's what defines a qualitative variable. Um, okay, now for our permutation test to work, you need one of each. So you need one quantitative and one qualitative variable. And the reason is that we're going to be putting them into categories according to their qualitative variable, right? So here we did red and blue. So here all the things that were red go in here, all the things that are blue go in here. Same thing with our, not that, here. Our qualitative variable here is the location. We did window versus door. Um, and so what we would do is we would make specific categories for window versus for door, right? And they would be like 6 and 25 for window, and they would be like 55, 17, and 19 for door, right? Now it's crucial that there's only two variables in the qualitative one. If there was three, it wouldn't work anymore. Okay. Now we must continue. We must continue. Okay. Now, this is where I elaborate on correlation, which is kind of what I did before. But here we're just, um, we are asking about correlation, right? When we look at number versus student, we're asking, does the number thought by the students in one one side of the room um, statistically differ from those in another side of the room, right? Um, that is correlation. It's just like not in the way I defined it earlier. It is, you remember how I did like one change in a variable causes, not causes, but like if you were to change one variable, you would observe a change in another variable. That's how I originally defined correlation. It's like this here, right? Um, if I were to go from the window side to the door side, would I witness a different, a statistically different set of numbers, right? Does that make sense? Um, so if I were to change the side of the room I was on, would the set of numbers I saw also change significantly? And that significantly is important because we're not looking for any odd difference. It could move like 0.1%. It could move like a decimal amount. But we don't care about that. We care about like jumping from 20 to 80. That's the sort of stuff we're looking at. All right. Okay. I feel like I'm getting too in detail about this. I'm gonna move on. We'll come back to this if we have time, basically. All right. Next up, we have to get the test statistic. This was pretty easy, so I won't go into this too detailed. And I don't have the data set. That's a problem. Give me a second. Virtual camera. I'm gonna see if they've posted this yet. Cases that. Curses. Curses. Damn. There is just no. There is. I don't have the data set. That's wonderful. That is truly wonderful. Fuck it. Okay. So, I'm gonna create my own random data set. Just imagine this was your data set, right? So, um, how do I create a table again? Right. Numbers. Okay, so I have to generate a random list of numbers. Random chance. And that was from 1 to 100. So np dot a range 1, 101. Step is assumed to be 1, so I don't have to write that. Np dot arrange 1, 101, and I want them to do it 100 times. So I'll have 100 random variables, right? So let me just see if that works, right? Random underscore chance. Huh? Np dot random chance. I have to look at that again. Interesting. Let me just search that up. NP random choice. Ah, right, and I have to change that to a period. See, we have like 100 randomly generated numbers, and to go along with that, I have patient, which is np.random.choice, np no, just window and door, and 100 times. And let's see if that works. It's taking a long time. It's not. It's It's crashing, I think. I think my internet connection's off. Give me a second. Okay, there we go. Just gonna put my screen back on. Okay, so here we got 100 random numbers, 100 random locations, right? Alright, I gotta clean up my storage. Give me a second. So many interruptions, man. Captures, screenshots, camera roll. Oh, camera roll. Okay, I've just deleted a bunch of my videos. Alright, so now what we have to do is we have to create our table, right? So I'm gonna say not simply fake table. Sure. A bit derogatory, but whatevs. Table dot with columns. Oh yeah, no. Numbers. Numbers. Location. Location. And we're just gonna have it display. Table. Oh, right. See, I make mistakes all the time. Okay. Oh, my band-aid's coming off. Okay, so this is our table. And in class, this is kind of what we would have gotten, except we don't have 100 students. So now, what we need to do is get test statistic, right? So, remember what I said? We have to group all the windows together. We have to group all the doors together. So what does that mean? We have to first create separate tables with only W and with only D, right? How do you do that? We got a filter. So fake table dot where, that's our filter function. W oh right. Where what's our column header location? Location R equal to, but a good shortcut, you don't have to do it you don't have to write R equal to, you can just write whatever it's equal to. And we get that. Oh, I said it was W and D. Okay. Just being consistent. Alright. So W equals the same thing. Fake table dot where location W. And we get that. So we've got 49 D's, 51 W's. So roughly equal. Okay. So now what do we do? Once we've split them, we need to take the average. So, how do we take the average? We need to... Oh God, this band-aid's giving me hell. I'm just gonna remove it. Okay. How do we take the average? Well, we can't take it in a table format. We have to turn it into an array and then take the average of that, right? So, let's start with the W because we can actually see that one. Okay. What do we need to take the average of? Numbers, right? So we would extract the numbers column and then take the average, right? How do we extract the numbers column? We do it via table, so that's our fake table, dot column, and our header, numbers. This is what we get, an array of numbers. And so all I gotta do is surround that with np.average, and that'll give us our average W. I'll just make that a variable. And same thing here. I can do average D, and that would equal the same thing, except, oh, not fake table. Oh, I'm doing it across the whole table. Oops, that's my bad. We're just gonna do the filter W table and the filter D table. That is my bad. I hope you guys are still with me. Oh, I didn't get them to call, but right now I can just define the test statistic. It's just the average W minus the average D. Now you can do average D minus average W. This might affect how the end result comes about, but other than that, no big deal. So I'll just have it call, and this is our test statistic. So on average, the W, the window side folk, were about 1.4, around root 2, around 1.4 above the numbers of the D, the door side, right? So that's our test statistic. In essence, in theory, the test statistic is a descriptor of the behavior. So, on average, going from D to W nets us an average increase of 1.4. Now, what the actual test is asking is whether this 1.4 is significant or not. Like, is this going to be all the time? One way to illustrate this is like here. So what we calculated was the test statistic. So let's just say that I'm gonna say that window is red, right? Window's red, door's blue, right? What we just It's the other way around. Okay. So that's door, that's window, right? So what we just said, we took the average, so these pointy lines, these vertical lines are the average. And that is around 1.4, right? What we did not say is about the range, right? So in a case where window and door are significant, window might occupy a range of like this much, right? And door might occupy a range of this much. Now we can say that whatever value of D we pick and whatever value of W we pick, the W value will always be above D simply because its range is just higher, right? However, if we were to have a different example where the averages are the same, so the test statistic is still exactly the same, it's at 1.4, but now the D is like spread out across like this whole bit, right? And W we just keep the same. Now we really can't be sure that whatever D value we pick will always be smaller than W because there's like this whole bit where D is at or greater than the range of W. So there's this range where D could be at or greater than W, and there's this range where D is for sure less than W. And through our permutation test, like we don't have access to these types of pictures, right? We this our eye. We can't see something like this. We just have to, using our permutation test, decide which is the truth, right? Is there significant overlap that we really can't be sure whether D or W is significant? Or is there very little overlap such that D and W are like completely separate, right? So that's another way to think of the permutation test, right? Okay. Um, okay, let's get back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so what I just answered is why doesn't the test statistic alone denote correlation? And that would be if the ranges of one are just so large that they encapsulate that of another, and then we can't be sure whether one variable is really statistically different from another. Okay? Alright, so this is where it really gets interesting is null and alternative hypotheses, right? So at the center of all this is two things called the null and alternate hypotheses. And you don't have to think of them as hypotheses, more like conclusions. They're the two possible conclusions you can get from this test. So the first off is the null, right? The null, the null says that any all any and all behavior between the two variables is solely due to random chance. And that would be the situation here, right? Um, Not really like the simulation situation there, but like the general quality that this 1.4 difference is just not significant. We just can't be sure that picking any value of d will be uh, lower than that of w. You know what I mean? It's all like I've drawn the two extremes here, but it could be like, let me just draw a whole spectrum, right? Spectrum. So over here on the left, we have not significant. And here we have is significant. God, my handwriting sucks. Um, Only is significant. We just have the extreme example where uh, one variable is completely separate from another, right? So there is a very significant, um, yeah, there it is significant, simply because um, just there is no overlap. On the other side, we have it such that the two overlap together. That would be like, we just really can't be sure that whatever value of d we get will be any different from whatever value of w we get. But in the middle, and this is where you'll normally get conclusions, is like where they slightly askew here, and then here they're just a bit more askew, and then here they're like almost apart. So they gradually grow apart, and so what you have is uh, here would be null, where the uh, two red and blue are not significant. Well, I mean the difference between them is not significant. You can really see that here, and here where the difference between them is very significant. All right, and between them it's like very little significance, moderate significance, pretty high significance, like total significance, right? And I forgot to do the alternate. So, alternate says I shouldn't be so concrete with these definitions. Between the two variables is due to an external factor, which basically says there was something other than random chance. Um, and then uh, that would be like the temperature and the drowning rate example, right? By external factor, it could be like A causes B, B causes A, um, something like that. Or maybe a third variable C could cause the differences in A or B, right? Okay. What do I need to do next? Okay, we got that. So, simulation. This is like the juicy part, right? You gotta pay attention here. Um, so, let me just quickly draw up what we did in class. So, what we had done, oopsies, was we need to draw some faces, right? So, what colors? So, you guys are W. So, you guys, oh, so you guys are the window folk, right? I'm gonna just draw you as happy faces. And then you guys are the door folk. So I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you guys are 6 as well, just to be consistent. All right. So this is what it was originally. There was some on the window side, some on the door side. And you guys had numbers attached to you. So I'll just do randomly. So like 6, 61, 49, 88, 34, and 60, right? And then you guys had like 29 or 73. 73 was really popular today. 49, like 91, um, and like 6 and 18, right? And so in a simulation, what's happening is that we're like randomizing one of the variables. So in this case, that randomized variable is the location of the room. So um, we had it such that each person was given a die. If they were odd, if they rolled like a 1, 3, or 5, which is odd, they would move to the other side. If it was even, they stayed. So like some people would go here, some people would go there, some people would just go here, and and I guess these would stay put. Or maybe like let's just have it such that he goes here, right? Okay, and now we would get a randomized test statistic again. So let me write down what we did, right? What did we do, guys? Simulation. What did we do? We randomized, we randomized one variable, and we then took a randomized test statistic. And this would happen, so this is one instance of simulation. Um, for a second one, we would do it again, right? So roll the die again. So you probably go here, and like you probably go there. And maybe he rolled 2 odds in a row, so he goes back to where he started. Um, maybe like you go here. But note that like um, although there's still a dividing line between uh, window and door, we're treating everyone here as though they were still windows, everyone here as though they were still doors. So the randomized test statistic would still be in terms of like the uh, the quote-unquote windows and the quote-unquote doors. They're not exactly windows and doors because everyone's scrambled now, right? So, um, okay. So, yeah, that was basically what happens in a simulation. Now let's translate that to code, right? So what did we do? We randomized one variable, we took a randomized test statistic. Now this is the approach, this is where I talk about the approach to coding, right? Um, the approach to coding is really like it's one of the most crucial things ever because this whole course is kind of about coding. So if you don't know how to approach coding, it's gonna be very hard to actually like be able to do code comfortably, right? So my big tip about coding is that you need to code with a goal in mind and to know what your steps are, right? So, for example, if I wanted to hang a picture up on the wall, what should I do? Well, I need a hammer, I need a nail, I need like a picture frame maybe, and like whatever I want to hang up on the wall, right? And then what do? I gotta do. I gotta hammer the nail into the wall, and then I gotta hang the frame onto the wall. Those are all discrete steps. And you can think of those as like each like one function that you have to do that all add up to what you're trying to do, right? So, what's my overall goal? It is to do let's do one simulation. Do one simulation. What are my steps? Well, first I got to randomize one variable, and then I got to get a randomized test statistic, right? So, now there's many ways to do this, especially the randomizing one variable, but I'm gonna do something here that I feel is the simplest one, the easiest to comprehend. And to do that, I have to do another analogy. So this one I call the jar analogy. I'm gonna I'm gonna put that there. Jar. Jar analogy. So imagine we have a jar. And imagine we took all these heads and we put them in the jar. So it would be like about that. So like imagine like these are all each ball is like either a window or a door, right? This is the overall data set. The overall data set exists as like a bunch of windows and a bunch of doors, right? That's how it exists. Um, now, um, we could, in theory, let's just bring that down. We could, in theory, separate all these, sort them all out, such that we have um, a separate little cup of all the how many windows are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 windows here, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 doors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's a bit overflowing here. But yeah, we could have had like separate cups of like windows and doors, and then we just like both like dump them in here and then like dump them in here, right? So it's all just randomized here. And then we use those same cups to just go in and then scoop out a bit, right? So what that means, so imagine this cup is now empty. I should draw an empty cup. Um, so imagine that this cup is now empty, right? And what I do is I have this jar of all the windows and doors mixed up. I go in and I scoop up a bunch. And that scooping up is equivalent to, well, let me get to that first off. Let me just label this. These are, whoops, these are the windows, these are the doors. And they're like nicely sorted, but we just dump everything in here, mix them all up, and then we use the same cups. So I should label this again. So this was what was the window cup. I'll create another door cup. Alright? So these are the same cups as before that can hold the same amount of stuff. So this can hold 8, this can hold 10. Um, and then what I do with each of them is I take them, I go inside to the random, I scoop up a bunch. I don't care if it's actually windows or doors. And then what I end up with, well, remember that this can only hold 8. I have a cup full of 8 observations, 8 balls. So let's just say like 3 of them are windows, but like 5 of them are doors, right? And that would mean that the ones in here are 5 windows, and there's 5 in here, and there's 5 over there. So 5 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? So this is essentially what the code I'm about to write does. And this all hinges upon one special function that I doubt you've seen, and that is um, Table.sample. No, rows. Now these two you would replace with, the table name and the number of rows you want to sample. But this sample function just gets in the table and just randomly selects that amount of rows. And that's what this does. Think of it as the cup. It can only hold 8 because that's how much windows there were. It goes and it scoops up 8 data points regardless of whether they're windows or doors, right? So what this means, we have our we're going to use the overall data set, remember? So fake table, and then sample the num rows. So let's do w first. W.num rows. So here, just to show you, I run it. You can see some d's in here, even though we wanted, we were doing the sampling of w, right? And so, oh my goodness, there's a bunch of these here. We run it again. It is all randomized each time. And it's getting 51 randoms because that's how many W's there were, right? How many rows are in the W table. Um, so now that we've got one of that, I should probably do this. So sim W. So this is the simulated W. And here's the simulated D. So same thing, fake table dot sample D dot num rows. So we've randomly done this. So this is our random W, random D. Now we've done the first step. We got to get the randomized test statistic. So that would be via the same thing here. We're doing the same thing we did to get the original test statistic, but now we're not using the actual like W and D. We're using the simulated W and D. So I would just say average sim W equals mp dot average, not W but sim W dot column numbers and average sim D equals empty dot average sim d column. And finally, we would do the random test stat equals average sim w minus average sim d. And let's just print it for good measure. Boom. So first off, we got a 4.0752. We run it again. Oh, it's different. Negative 0.774. So each time we're randomly taking from W and D, not from W and D, from the whole table. It's like scooping out. Ooh, sorry. And then we're grabbing a random test statistic out of that. And that's what's causing all these different values to appear. So that was one simulation. I'm just gonna copy these. Now the next step, we have to do it 1,000 times. Well, next step, we have to do it 1,000 times, and we have to store them all in a designated list. Now that list, you all know, to create a list is to do, I'm gonna call it simulations. It's to just empty brackets, right? Simulations equals empty list. So we did that. Now we have to do it 1,000 times, and that is where we have to do the iterative loop for I in um, mp.arange 1,000. So this is just me telling it to repeat 1,000 times. And of course, I have to indent all these. And this last step, we can't just define random test stat because that doesn't really do anything. We want to just add it directly to simulations. Simulations.append that. That's how we append something to the list. And as a little bonus, I'm going to include something called a tracker. What I call a tracker. I don't know if the data science community as a whole calls it a tracker. But whenever I have big iterative loops like this, I want to have at least some indication that my code is working. So what I'm going to do is if I send 100 equals 0, I'm just saying if I, whatever number that is divisible by 100, then I'm telling it to print I and put simulations done. I'm just saying, like, if it were I was 100, then 100 divided by 100 gives a remainder of 0. Then that satisfies this. So it says print 100 simulations done. So I know that 100 simulations are done. So, of course, I have to do an else pass. So this means if it's not divisible by 100, just leave it alone. Don't do anything. That's what the pass says. Alright. So everything looks good. I'm just gonna run this. Cool. That was quick. So 0, 100, 200, 300, 400. Did everything. So now we can look at simulations. And we should see 1,000 simulations. And I'm just gonna make sure it actually is 1,000. 1,000. Well done. Okay. So I should get back to the PowerPoint. Yeah, I wasn't really following along on this. Oh, yes. Okay. So we got this, we got that. Now this part, the theory, that's really important. And it's also one of the most complicated stuff in this lecture, right? In this lecture, he says, while being all professional and shit. Because he's in his basement, in pajamas. Now, I have two words to describe that, right? Assumption, oh, it's not two words. It's four words. Assumption of the null. We are inducing random chance in this data set, right? I should write this down. This is important. Theory behind induces randomness in, yeah. And what that means is it looks at what would happen, like what the behavior would be if um if it was truly random, meaning if the null hypothesis was true. And that's what assumption of the null means. It's just looking at what if the null hypothesis was true. Um, Now, how this interacts with the data set, this is where I want to get into something called the card analogy. And I just thought of this on the train, so bear with me. Now, imagine we were doing a statistical test on a pile of cards, right? On a deck of cards, sorry. So here's my deck of cards, right? Looks like a book, but it's a deck of cards. And what I'm looking at is, well, you don't have to look at it, just think of it as the deck of cards. Don't think of any other statistical test right now. Um, but here I want to think of two possibilities, right? So, okay. Possibility one is that the deck is brand new. It's spanking brand new. It's right out of the case. No one's touched it yet. And what I mean by that is that um, you would have, it would just not be shuffled at all. So you would have at the top you would have starting from the beginning ace, 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 two, 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 three, 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 all the way to kings, 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 right? And now we have a second possibility is that the deck is shuffled. It's been well used, they've been doing it millions of times, and the order is just completely random. And here you have six or kings and eights and twos, and it's just completely random, no order. And so a simulation would be, in essence, a shuffling of the deck. You can think of it that way. You would shuffle the deck. And let me just make these smaller, right? So what would happen as a result is that in possibility one, what you end up with is completely different from what you started out with. Now this is completely random, whereas here it was completely not random, right? So in the simulation, the behavior would be completely different from what you started with, which is the actual data set. Let me just say that this is the actual data set right here. Whatever pile of cards you started with, and then here, once you shuffled it, it would be a representation of a simulation. So now actual data set and simulation are completely different because here it was not shuffled, here it is shuffled. And so the behavior is like way out of whack. Here in the other scenario, you have another completely random deck. But here, there is no difference in behavior between them. This was completely random, this is completely random. Right? So now the shuffling and the randomness, like the actual dataset and the simulation, are completely the same. And so what this means is that you've got two different outcomes, right? So um, so now I can summarize possibility one as the following: actual differ significantly. And remember, simulation is representing the null hypothesis. So saying that the actual data set differs from that significantly means that um, it is not random chance, and that the alternate hypothesis is true. And here, since the actual data set and the simulation are pretty much the same in terms of behavior, do not. So the null hypothesis is true. I'm going to go into detail about like the reasoning behind this later on, but this is in general what's it about. Like, is the simulation similar to the actual data set? Then no hypothesis is true, because if the simulation is random and the actual data set matches the simulation, actual data set is also random. Are we still recording? Good. Whoo boy. Assumption of the null, cards, analogy. Okay, we're going swell. Alright, we only have two more sections. And the first one is about the p-value. I should get out my PowerPoint now. Yada 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 yada. P-value. Okay. So first, in order to get the p-value, you first have to like visualize what is on the graph. Well, you don't have to visualize, but it's good to look, right? So, first, I want to visualize my simulations. I'm gonna do plt.hist simulations. That gives us a histogram. I'll just run it right now. Oh, right, yeah. Oh, this one's complicated. Give me a second. Give me a second. I gotta grab it from this. Yeah. Yeah, matplotlib is super annoying in that they have you do 3 lines of code to import stuff. So, where was I? Oh, and Untitled 2. Right. We gotta put that all the way up here. So now, when we go back here, boom. We got simulations. I'll increase the bin size. Bin is equals 40. Boom. Dang, that's pretty irregular. So, you'll see that as the simulations form like what's called a bell curve, and it's centered around 0, right? So that means like random chance means both sides are equal. So like one side minus another side will be pretty much equal to 0, right? That's basically like how it is. Okay. And now I can add to this plt.scatter. What is it? Test stat 0. Um, color was blue. Okay. So that blue dot right down there is our actual test statistic, and the red is what the randomness generated, right? I just have 0 here because this is technically an x value and this is a y value. So I put the dot at the x value of the actual test statistic. The 0 is just because it'll be on the bottom line, right? Okay. So measure. So the p-test, the p-value is in essence a measure of how alike the random and actual test statistics are. So remember how in the card analogy you had actual dataset and simulation differ significantly or do not differ significantly? The p-value is a quantitative measure about like how much they differ by. And from that value, we can generate like conclusions about whether it's significant or not, right? And we do that by looking at what percentage of these simulations are bigger than the actual test statistics, right? So p-value is, well, first let's define our goals. This is something I want to emphasize, right? Goal. P-value. What is it? Well, I mean like steps or definition. The percentage of random, I'll just say they are contained in the variable simulations that are bigger than the actual test stat, which is in the variable test stat, right? So this is pretty complicated. Um, your steps for this would be to um, so simulations are an array. Test stat is a single value. So when you try to compare them, compare the array booleans and then use np.count non-zero to the true boolean values, and then we express that as a percentage of the whole. Does everyone understand what we're trying to do? Probably not. Okay, we'll do it step by step then. So, first step, compare the array of simulations with test statistic, right? Simulations greater than or equal to, not greater than or equal to. We're just asking if it's greater than test stat. And what we get is 1,000 true or falses. So if it's false, that means it wasn't greater. If it's true, that means it was greater, right? So now I've given you the function, which is np.count non-zero. And what it does is that it looks through all this. If it's false, it adds 0 to a counter. It just does nothing. If it's true, it adds 1, right? So here, it gave me 369 trues, right? And finally, express that as a percentage of the whole. I know we did 1,000 simulations, so that would be 0.369. So that means 36.9% of the simulations were greater than our actual test statistic, right? I should probably write this down. Steps. Maybe I shouldn't write this down. It's all code, but you can look at it on the Jupyter notebook. That's pretty much how it is. Oh yes. Percentage of the that is the core of the p-value, right? And I want to now, like, it might be pretty unintuitive how the p-value would actually do this. In that case, I have one final analogy, right? And that is the bone analogy. So imagine you're a paleontologist out in the field, and you have just secured yourself a huge femur, right? That's you looking happy, and that's the femur you got, right? And like all video game enthusiasts, you hold it above your head while it shines for a few seconds, and then like triumphant music plays while you do that. Okay? And now you gotta do the difficult task. Oh, my battery. Um, of identifying which dinosaur that femur came from, right? And so, just for the sake of simplicity, let's say that you did all the other tests. It's all like come down to this. Once you figure out like the identity of the femur, then like the identity is certain, right? And so of course you go to, the most famous dinosaur in the world, the T-Rex, and you look at prior findings or like data on what typical T-Rex femurs look like, right? And that would give you like a general range. I should look this up, right? So how are of course that's given my internet actually works. 1.23 meters. Okay, so around like 1.23 then. Well, remember, T Rexes are subject to biological variability, right? Not every single T Rex has a femur of 1.23, right? Some of them could be children when they had died, so their femur lengths could be around like here-ish, or maybe some of them had like unnaturally large bodies, so they could be like here-ish, right? So what you end up with is not like a single value, but like a whole distribution, right? That's a bad curve. There, right? And so your job is that you got to compare the length of your femur with all these. And remember, this is an analogy, right? So this represents all the random test statistics you got. This represents the actual. And the act of comparing, that's what's the p value is all about, right? So imagine your femur lands like right here, right? Holy smokes, that's huge. That's like more than double what was previously mentioned in the findings. And you're like, holy moly, it's so out of range. It couldn't possibly be a T-Rex femur, because like the prior findings don't nearly go out that far, right? Um, but if it's here, you're like, wow, that pretty much exactly matches the previous findings. This must be a T-Rex, right? So that's the action of um, comparing the actual versus random. If it's here versus here. So let me just um, so here versus here, right? Uh, if it's here, length of your femur. So if the length of your femur is here, it matches the lengths of prior T-Rexes, and you have a T-Rex. You can be reasonably confident that you have a T-Rex. Whereas here, I'll just lengthen this. Um, of your femur. So if it's way out here, the length of the femur does not match those of the previous T-Rexes, so you do not have a T-Rex. Now these are the two cases of like here smack dab in the middle, here way outlandish. But the trouble spot is um, right around like right around like here, and that's where the p value is most useful, right? That's a bit big. I'll just say like around here, and that's around like the last like 10% or so, right? Um, this is the trouble spot because on one hand there are um there are femur lengths that do match yours, but at the same time, so little of the like it's not way outlandish. There are femur lengths that do match yours, but that is only like a sliver of the population. So, in theory, those could have been like just deformities, just like strange occurrences, and what you would have is not a T-Rex. Or maybe these are one of the strange deformities, and just you just have a T-Rex that is abnormally built, right? So this is the trouble spot, and that's where the p-test comes in, because the p-test, the p-value actually, it puts an arbitrary barrier between and insignificant. I spelled that terribly. Oh, good lord. Insignificance. So it says, okay, any percentage um, below this amount is significant. Any percentage above, not significant, right? Um, And usually, for the purposes of this course, that's around 5%, right? So if 5% of the random test statistics match the actual 5% or lower, we we can say that it is significant and that the alternative hypothesis is true, right? Man, I did a shitload. Okay, now what does this mean? Well, we got a p-value of 36.9. That's a huge amount. And that means that enough of the simulations match its behavior for us to say that this is just not significant. There is no significant difference between the window side and the door side, right? That's our main conclusion. Let me just write that down here. So 36.9% is greater than 5%. Shall we say that this is not significant? And we just say null hypothesis is accepted. That's our conclusion. Mm-hmm. If it were less than 5%, we would be like, alternative hypothesis is accepted. All right. So null random chance means no effect. It's not significant. It's just due to random chance. Alternate means there is an effect. Something must have influenced like the window side or the door side. Excuse me, for people to think of different numbers. Right? Okay. Null versus alternative possibilities of causation. I won't focus on that for now. I'll focus on the additional conclusions. Um, there are a number of additional conclusions you should think of. It's not just blanket, like, significant versus not significant. There's all sorts of nuances you can put in your conclusions. So first off, um, significance. Um, imagine like two variables are significant, but like only across a tiny, tiny, tiny margin, like 0.1. Like at that scale, is that sort of thing useful? And that answer might not be right. That the answer might not be yes. Even though it is significant, it's just like we're doing this like to get conclusions that matter to real world applications. So like to getting a difference that is like so small is like ooh, that's like kind of like that's like useless maybe. Kind of like imagine like you've used the p-test to prove that a drug like increases the chances of survival, and then you inspect further and see that like it increased it by 0.1%, like the chances of surviving from like the super scary cancer, and it raised it by 0.1%. That's a tiny, tiny, tiny amount, and you're like, ooh, is all that is like is all that like money used to like develop the drug, or like is that really like worth it given that small increment? It's like it could go either way. Validity. Does this match expected results? Like, um, if during our summer program, this group had this conclusion that like smoking um does not cause heart disease. They got a p-value that was more than 5%, And then like some people in the audience were like kind of skeptical of that because like, hmm, like our intuition would have us believe that smoking does lead to heart disease, but now this thing is telling us that it doesn't. So what should we think about that? And this brings about the idea of assumptions, right? Because here we are always thinking about assumptions because we unknowingly are making them all the time. So one big assumption is that um, only two variables we are dealing with are the only the two variables we are dealing with are how should I say this? Like only they matter. Right, like only they influence each other's behavior, right? Um, in terms of the in-class example, that means like location, only location determines the number that someone would choose, nothing else. And that might not be true. Like a female person might choose a different number than a male person for some reason, but we haven't considered that because we just assumed that it wasn't actually gonna affect anything, right? That might be wrong, right? Um, we also might assume um, uh, that a variable might be this or that, like the wrong type of variable. And this goes back to the example of the heart disease. The summer group um, treated this as a quantitative variable, even though like 0 means no heart disease, yes means one heart disease, 1 means yes heart disease. Um, uh, yeah, and that might not be right. That's assumption that like it's on the fence. Like, does this matter? Does this not matter? We don't know. Um, are there any other assumptions I'm missing? I definitely am missing assumptions, but my battery is being drained as we speak. So I'll leave it there. You can think of other assumptions. Um, further work. And this means like once you've done the test, you can't just like wipe your hands off and go off into the sunset. Like we do this for real world applications. So if we've proved that like a drug is pretty good, like statistically better at preventing some disease, then we will go ahead and like move further along in the drug making process. Like maybe we're gonna do more clinical trials, maybe do more tests to really solidify that conclusion. Maybe if the validity seems questionable, then we'll repeat the tests a bit to see if further further trials actually get the same result. That sort of thing. Like given the result that you get, what would you do next? That's the main thing. All right. Applications. I already talked about drug development. We've got experimental versus control. So control doesn't get the new drug, experimental does, and we see the effects between the two. That is a something where you can use the permutation test. You also see in a bunch of these like hearsay stuff or maybe like articles around the world that say like smoking leads to lung cancer or like exercise leads to um, uh, lesser chance that you'll develop this or that disease. This these types of like correlations are often done using stuff like the permutation test because they look at people with or without lung cancer and they look at like people how long they exercise and so they they use those two variables to generate, simulations, and they do the p-test and all that. That's that's due to stuff like the p-test that they can say like smoking and lung cancer are correlated, right? It would you would have to do extra proofing to actually say that smoking leads to lung cancer, but that's out of the scope of this. But beyond that, there's everyday use for this. Like, you can use this wherever. It's one of the most versatile stuff, just being able to say that something and something are correlated, right? For you guys gamers, now I have your attention. Um, does doing this doing this little thing, or maybe one of those like gaming rituals, like imagine like um maybe like if you were to do 10 jumping jacks, would you perform better in this game? Um, if you were to like game right after a meal, does this increase or decrease your accuracy? Something like that. I know it's not really useful in the grand scheme of things, but you'd want to know something like that. You want to improve your gaming acumen. Come on. And shopping, travel, these these might not be as like niche as gaming, but like they do have like real world applications in that you can make better decisions um, by judging like whether um, store A's prices are significantly lower than store B. You can make decisions based on that, save yourself some money, right? So for all of these, all you need is a data set, and then you can get actual benefits from this sort of thing, right? Isn't that what you want in life? Benefits? Anyways, yada yada, we're not going to do this. Okay, so that is my lecture on the permutation test. And this is pretty much the end of the first T&Tlog. How are we doing? Doesn't show the time. Anyways, I'm gonna end it right here before oh my god, it's been 2 hours. Okay, alright, that's fine. Um, okay. eh. I'll end it right here before my computer fucking dies. Alright? Oh yes, I'll post everything maybe in the description, and I'll post chapters, I promise. Alright?